Okay, hope you understand a little bit about fertilizers and lime now and how it works and how we're working at a recommended level, typically trying to maintain a good fertility. Again, depending on whether you're doing this on your own or you're doing it for commercial operations like to maintain a little bit higher. My last video lecture addressed that. But we're going to try to keep it at that optimum level here as we look at it. So here's the information we have in the worksheet you're going to work through. So we're going to walk through field 1 here, and then you'll need to do field 2 for the quiz as you work through that. So this is basic results are from NICC 3P analysis. I'll talk about that in just a second. Field moist, fine textured soil. The parts per million are listed there, and that's all I really need off a soil test report. I'm not going to pull an example soil test report up because they all look a little bit different. But the only thing I really need is that lab analysis on the phosphorus test, the potassium test, and then the buffer pH to make a recommendation. Crops are corn this year. It was corn last year, but 2 years ago it was alfalfa. We'll get to that in a minute too. We're going to put some manure on there, only about 3,000 gallons, but that manure analysis as we look at it has a 13-7-20 analysis. What that means is every 1,000 gallons of manure has 13 pounds of nitrogen, 7 pounds of phosphorus, and 20 pounds of potassium. Now, we're going to figure all 13 pounds of nitrogen are available. When we get to manure management planning here in a little while, we're going to say no, not all nitrogen available. That's true. So that's going to be a little more sophisticated, but to keep it a little bit simpler, at least for this lab, we're going to say it's 100% available. That's not really true. Some of it evaporates, some of it decays slower if it's organic nitrogen and so forth. But for our lab, we'll just say all 13 is available, okay, per 1,000 gallons. Yield goal of 180. We've talked about yield goals already. That's what we're setting here. And then our fertilizer. We're going to use urea, which has an analysis of 4600, which means 46% of that urea is nitrogen. Or on 100 pounds of urea, we get 46 pounds of nitrogen. That's what analysis means. DAP is 18460, diammonium phosphate. It means 18% nitrogen, 46% phosphorus, and 0% potash in that fertilizer. And then in potassium has 60% potassium in it and no nitrogen or phosphorus in it. So that's what analyses are. Costs are per ton. Divide that. We can actually figure out the cost per pound. I went and did that calculation for you right now. Plus, we're going to pay $7 an acre to get this put on. Why are we using urea instead of anhydrous like you did with your example with the N-rate calculator? Anhydrous is cheaper, but by using urea, DAP, and potash, I can blend it all into one dry application and throw it out there. Now, with variable rate technology, you probably put on individual fertilizers anymore, so we don't see this as common with VRT now as we used to when we put on one application of blending everything together. So, step 1, we're going to come down here, and that's determine our nitrogen needs. You've already done a worksheet on nitrogen needs, so I'm not going to make you do that again. In fact, if you put these numbers in from this worksheet, you're probably going to come up with something different than 175. But for our purpose, we're going to use 175. So don't bother running that. I'm going to give you the answer to question 1. It's 175. It's actually a little bit different if you run the numbers right now. But to keep everybody the same and keep this worksheet consistent, I'll give you that answer as 175. It's a nice round number to work with, too, as we look at it. So we got to determine phosphorus and potassium needs. Okay, we're going to use this table up here, so keep that out as you look at it. And we're going to go to the pamphlet as we look at it. And let me go back to the beginning of the pamphlet here. So this is the pamphlet you downloaded. This was on PM 1688. It's a very good reference used throughout the Midwest. It's in Iowa, but it's used throughout the Midwest because it's fairly consistent as we go around. This one's from October 2013. If you go to Iowa State Extension, they might have an update to this. I'm not sure. I haven't checked. But we're going to use the 2013 version of this just so we have something out there that's consistent with what we're doing in class. If there's an up-to-date, fine. Go use the update for your own recommendations as you work with it. For this class, we'll use this version. So we can go on down through it, and here's basically tells you where some parts per million, some things, some good information to read through there, crop removals. But where I want to get to is Table 3. Table 3 is for corn grain production. This is corn on corn, corn grain. Soybeans is different. That's Table 4. You can scroll down through the rest of this book. You'll find corn silage. You'll find alfalfa. And every crop has a little bit different nutrient requirements. We're on corn grain. I said we're using NICC 3 ICP, or NICC 3P, excuse me. That is a test I'm going to use for standard for this quiz, at least as we look at it. Olsen is another type of lab test done out there. It's just the acid they mix with in the lab. Olsen quite commonly is used out in the western states where they have a higher pH soil. It works better on alkaline soils than the Bray and the NICC do. And then a lot of labs now are switching to the NICC 3 ICP. So if you have a soil test in the last year or so, it may quite possibly NICC 3 ICP. That's an important thing to know. What type of acid is your lab using that's doing the extraction of these numbers, because it gets different numbers depending on the acid. So you need to find that out from your lab before you use these tables. Keep that in mind. All right. Once you know that, it's fairly easy. So we're just going to say we're going to use the first one for our example. Our soil report came back at 10 parts per million. That puts us in the low range. At the low range, we're going to need 75 pounds of P2O5 per acre. That's what our recommendations is there as we look at it. If we come down to potassium now, I said it was field moist. In other words, we took a sample, threw it in a bag, sealed up that bag. It's not gooey mud, okay, but it is moist. It's not dried out. You're going to get a different number if you dry it out completely than if you use it as a moist soil. So if it was moist, our results, as you look at the table, was 70 parts per million. That falls in between 51 and 85. I said it was fine textured. That means I need to put on 90 pounds of potassium nutrient. Not potassium fertilizer, potassium nutrient. Same thing, phosphorus nutrient at 75, not phosphorus fertilizer. And we'll get to that in a minute. If it was a sandy textured soil, we'd put on 70. Well, what if it's a loam, a nice medium texture? Well, 80, okay? Just kind of interpretate that yourself. Okay, so that takes care of the table and finding out our information, and that answers question 2. Okay, so you're going to do the same thing, but you're going to do it for field number 2 up there. Now we're going to go down to 3, and that's where we put the manure on. Remember, 3,000 gallons per 1,000 gallons. There's our analysis. So I take 3 times 13, I got 39 pounds of nitrogen. 3 times 7, I got 21 pounds of phosphorus. And 3 times 20, again, this is per 1,000 gallons, I got 60 pounds of potassium nutrient in that fertilizer. Subtract those out. There's my recommendations for step 3. All done with step 3. Step 4 is going to say previous crops. Well, if it was soybeans last year, I'm going to take a 50-pound credit. Unless it was a really lousy soybean crop. If, like, say, maybe you got 20 or 30 bushels of soybeans. If you only got 30 bushels of soybeans, just take 30 pounds, a pound per bushel. Once you get up to 50 pounds, that's about what you're going to get. If you get 90 bushels of soybeans, you're probably not going to get a lot more than 50 pounds of nitrogen. Why? Because when it gets that high, that soybean is really eating up that extra nitrogen there. So we don't want to really credit our soil because it's scavenging some there. In fact, some agronomists will say, hey, we don't even take credit for soybean nitrogen anymore. I tend to differ on that. I still am going to take about 50 pounds of credit in there. I'm not going to spend money on nitrogen I don't need to spend, is the way I'll look at it. But we didn't have soybeans. We didn't even have alfalfa last year. If it was alfalfa last year, it says it's a range between 120 and 180. I usually say if there was a good alfalfa stand, and if you're a dairy farmer, you plowed up a good alfalfa stand. Even a beef farmer, most beef farmers are still plowing up pretty decent alfalfa stand. I say you probably don't need any nitrogen this year for corn. You're going to have enough out there. You can put a little bit on maybe if you want to put in a starter, but I wouldn't go out and put anything extra on there. So, it wasn't alfalfa last year, it wasn't soybean last year, but 2 years ago it was alfalfa. Well, alfalfa is such a large rooted crop, massive root system on it, that even 2 years later that root system was still decaying and releasing some nitrogen. So we're going to take 30 pounds of credit from that from 2 years ago. So 136, which is what we had up above on step 3, minus 30, we're now needing 106 pounds of nitrogen nutrient per acre. You do it for field 2. Come down to step 5. Now determine the amount of DAP. Well, DAP is our phosphorus source. We're going to do that before we do our nitrogen source because DAP does have nitrogen in it, diammonium phosphate. It does have some nitrogen in it. So we're going to go with that. The analysis of DAP is 18,460. There's 18 pounds of nitrogen, 46% phosphorus, and 0% potassium in it. So I know I need 54 pounds from right up here of phosphorus nutrient divided by the analysis of 0.46. I get 117 pounds of DAP that I'm going to need per acre. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Urea is a little more complicated. Urea is my nitrogen source. Remember, it was, come up the top, 4600. There's no phosphorus, no potassium in it. But when I put my DAP on here, I did get some extra nitrogen with it. Was it free? Oh, I paid for it, but we're going to count it, okay? We're going to take credit for it. So I put 117 pounds on up here. Well, I'm going to take 117 times that 18% nitrogen in DAP, and I'm going to end up having 21 pounds of nitrogen that I got with that DAP fertilizer. Subtract that from what I need, the 106 from up here, and I end up getting 85 pounds divided by the analysis of urea, 0.46. That's just a coincidence that it's the same as DAP. Nothing special there, just happens to be a coincidence, but hey, that's the number. And we end up finding we need 185 pounds of urea fertilizer per acre. Finally, potash. Potash has analysis, if you go up to the top here, of 0.060, so it means it's 60% potash, 60% potassium in the potash. 30 divided by that 60% gives you 50 pounds per acre you need for potash. Finally, figure your cost, 185 pounds of nitrogen from the urea, times that price per pound, times the DAP times the price per pound, times the phosphate, potash times the price per pound, and don't forget to add in the custom applicator cost of $7 an acre, and we finally get a total cost of $147 for fertilizer. That's for field 1. You need to do field 2. We come on down to step 9. We're going to determine our pH and our liming needs. Well, we determine lime from buffer pH. Buffer pH is a pH number they get in the lab. What they do is they get your soil sample and they mix a buffer with it, kind of like they mix lime with it, let's just say that, and then they retest it. It's a fixed amount, a standard used by the industry, and they figure out what changed in the pH. So they kind of know what effect the lime has on the pH. With that, you get the buffer pH number, you can go to a table. So our buffer pH numbers were right here. We were at buffer pH number 6.1. Back in here, we got to go to page 11. Scroll on down. Here's page 11, and I had a buffer pH of 6.1. I carried that across because I'm going to have alfalfa in my rotation. Even though this year's corn, I got a looks like alfalfa that's kept in my rotation. So I want to lime it to alfalfa levels. Corn, we're probably okay with 6.5. Probably could even get by with 6 if you wanted to, but most people will lime to 6.5. That's your best bet to keep it at if you're a corn soybean farmer. 6.9 if you're going to have alfalfa in a rotation. And they generally recommend nowadays, if I'm going to have alfalfa 2 years from now, to lime it the year before corn. That gives us a whole year to react with that soil and bring the pH of that soil up to where it needs to be. So 8,500 pounds is what I'm going to need of pure lime as we look at it. 8,500 pounds to bring it up to 6.9 pH. Come back to my worksheet. Come down to the bottom there. So I said I had 8,500 pounds. But this lime we're digging out of that gravel pit is not 100% effective. There's lots of reasons it's not perfect, okay? It's 60% effective. That's what the ECCE number is. We come down there. 85 divided by that 60% effective means I need 14,000 pounds of this liming material. You buy lime by the ton or by 2,000 pounds, so I need 7.08 tons times $25 per acre applied. There's my $177. That is my fertilizer worksheet. Do that all for field number